All right, we're going to be here.
Are you taking a job? Okay.
Is this line? Is this one? Okay.
We were figuring, well, I mean, I can, but we were figuring out if she was just going to do both or if she was going to recruit an assistant.
We're just having a mini party up here for a sec. Don't mind us.
You're
Just a
good
mini party.
You're good to do both, or do you want me to do it for you for this part of the...
Also, this is a live
Okay.
Two arrows. We're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
So, I was told a joke before, like while everyone was arriving. What happens to bad rainbows? They're sent to Prism, where they're given a light sentence, which gives them time to reflect and refract. Thank you, Grant Linney. Welcome everybody to the 8th of 9 monthly meetings as held by the Hamilton Naturalists Club. So I'm Jackson Hudekian, president of the board of directors. So this is our second last one here in April. Next month will be our last before we take a break for June, July, and August. And then we start the series over again in September. So I'm excited that you're all here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. We've got some really great things to chat about, but is this your first time here by a show of hands? First time? Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. The Naturalist Club is 107 years old. I won't get into the whole thing. What I do like to do at the beginning of meetings, though, is ask about any recent nature sightings anyone has had. Since the last meeting or in the last couple of weeks, spring is very much upon us now. I've had dragonflies in my backyard. I live around the corner from here. I've had dragonflies in my backyard, which has been great to see. On Good Friday, I was in the backyard. That was the day where it was felt like 30 degrees, kind of like today, but I don't know, it was more humid that day or something. But either way, and a Compton tortoiseshell landed in my backyard, a butterfly. I didn't know what it was. I posted it to my Instagram account, and James Lees, Hamilton's, one of the key birders here, as well as Matt Mills in the back there, both sent ID that it was a Compton tortoiseshell. So it was a lifer butterfly. So thank you, Mr. Mills. And pine siskin are staying in my area. I still have them today, which is crazy. So it's really neat to have had them most of the winter, which is a first for me in downtown. When I first saw them, I was like, oh my God, pine siskin. And they've stayed. So it's been really exciting to have them remain up to this point. I'm sure they're going to migrate soon with the junk. Oh, they could be breeding, yeah.
They'll breed before they migrate.
Really? And then they'll lay the eggs when they get so.
No, they'll breed here and then they'll fly north to eat.
Rob Porter. Okay. Interesting. I don't know. I've been hearing more and more. Okay. Well, I know dark-eyed juncos and American tree sparrows. We'll see those migrating north. We'll see the ducks migrating north. But we're starting to see migrants return. So shoot your hand up. I'll just point at you. What have you seen?
The tundra swans by the thousands at Princess Point.
Cool. Tundra swans by the thousands. Who else has seen a tundra swan in the last couple of weeks? Awesome. All right. Yes.
I saw a black-backed salamander at the RBG aviary. Someone picked it up during a tree planting.
Okay. Very cool. Salamander. Yeah. Pine warblers, first of the year for you?
Yep.
Where did you have them?
At the RBG, yeah,
Great.
on the North Shore.
Great, yeah, warblers are starting to make their return. I think a black-throated green warbler was seen today. They're called northern yellow warblers now, have been spotted as well, which is cool. So thanks, Deb. Yeah.
The baby great horned owl was found in a nest up at the res.
Oh, no, just around here.
Just up the hill.
Oh, interesting. Baby great horned owl and the...
Still there yesterday, so yeah.
Okay, but you can't tell anyone but me where that location is. No, but of course we keep owl, especially baby locations, top secret as best we can, but that's great. I didn't know they were nesting so close. I saw a few other hands up. Who's seen some stuff? Back there. Yeah, you.
Can I comment on something from a different continent?
Why not?
Penguins.
Penguins. Where did you see those?
Emperor and Adelie at Cape Adair in Antarctica.
Wow. Has anyone been to Antarctica before? Not many people. Very cool. How close did you get close to them? Were they far away?
The emperor penguins were probably where the wall wall is over there.
Cool.
But there was a bit of water between us. And the Adelis are very curious, so they like walk up to you and they're maybe 6-8 feet away from you and then they just stare up at you.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Okay, no penguins locally. Yeah, Barb? Lapland longspur. So you got, yeah, so there was a report of like well over 200 of them. So on Monday last week, Charlie and I and Kevin Empey went for a drive. We counted over 300 Lapland longspurs up in the Stony Creek mountain area, Mud Road and 10th. Yeah, just circling the cornfields, but landing in the sunflower fields. I'd never seen one before, let alone 300 of them. So they were really far away. It wasn't like, getting crippling views of them where you can like study them, but it was still really great. So that's great, Barb. Thank you. That's another hand up back there.
I believe I saw a woodcock.
Oh, an American woodcock?
Yeah.
Where did you see that?
Right back there.
What? How did you know it was a woodcock? What makes you?
Well, I looked it up.
Yeah.
Because I saw this bird with a huge long beak. I'm like, what the heck? And I think that's what it was, just what I was thinking.
Actually, there's someone in the crowd tonight who had the pants scared off of him because of a woodcock when he opened the door. I'm not pointing right at him or anything, but I got a text like, is this a wood? Yeah, so that's a great sighting. Very cool. What else? What other sightings has anyone had? Yeah.
William Connell Park today, fox sparrow,
Fox sparrow?
yellow-rumped warbler, and woodcock, all in the woods back there.
I love it. William Connell Park is on West 5th in Rymel. It's a really accessible park. They've converted a stormwater management pond. So there's nice kind of asphalt paths and it turns into like a crushed gravel path. So it's pretty accessible. It's kind of hilly in some spots, but forest and this stormwater pond. So it's a bit of a migrant trap. So if you're on the West Mountain, William Connell Park, look it up. Where's my plant nerds? Oh, you got another one?
Yeah, one that's here in my backyard. It was either a Cooper's or a red-tailed hawk, but it ended up hitting my window. And I found a product that I'm gonna put on the window to avoid that.
Wonderful. Look at that. It's a perfect response to.
In the yard before, but
Yeah.
this one just.
It's unfortunate when that happens, eh? It just breaks your heart. Well, I'm glad you're going to take some action for that. Check out the Fatal Light Awareness Program, FLAP, if you want to know more. Yes?
Well, I was thinking about that. Sheldon's not here today. Sheldon Berger. That's McGregor. So he I used his template and his daubers for my windows. So if you're in a budget and you want to do
I
things.
use those. It's basically what he does is, it's a slime that you get from like Dollarama for a garage
Yes.
sale, and he's punched holes in it, and you just color it in with a Sharpie.
Oh, cool.
My entire house is covered with those. It costs $0, and I've never had a bird in my window after that.
And what's the product you're using to make the white?
A Sharpie.
Just a white?
Sharpie.
Okay, cool. Great.
But too bad that people
I
have
don't have,
much.
I don't have a Sharpie, it's something that Sheldon has in his package, so it's different. You have to shake the pen,
Okay.
and it has some aluminum kind of thingy appearance.
For those at home, we're just talking about how to treat your windows in case a bird hits it.
And if you make the template yourself, the holes have to be a specific distance apart,
Okay, great.
or the birds will,
Jean, what's a plant sighting you've had recently, though? In nature, something that's blooming.
mostly in my garden.
Yeah. Okay.
So, bloodroot's up.
Bloodroot. And we see bloodroot recently. I've seen a few pictures online. Great. Good.
Lots of things are just appearing.
Yeah.
Ginger, wild ginger's up.
Wild ginger. Great.
Bluebells.
Awesome. We had so much bird content. This isn't the bird study group, Rob Porter. We want to try and. And you had your hand up?
I have twin flower coming up.
Twin flower?
Lovely.
Twin leaf? Great.
Morning float
I don't know what that is. Morning cloak butterfly?
at the same place.
Yeah. What's that? Hepatica. Great. And you've got a hand up? Oh, garter snakes. Nice. I've been seeing, people posting. I've seen someone post a picture of like a DeKay's brown snake as well from the weekend. That's great. Yeah, you had your hand up?
Greek anemone.
Greek anemone. Okay. Where did you see that?
In my front.
In your. Okay, great. You planted it. Okay, great. Yeah, Natalie.
I saw a green frog today.
A green frog. Nice. And where was that?
Along the main loop.
Main Loop, Dundas Valley Conservation Area. Awesome. Pete?
Painted turtle.
Painted turtle. Great. Good. Yeah.
Katie did eggs on my service berries.
Katie did eggs. Wow. And so how did you know they were katydid eggs?
I had to Google image.
Great. That's the way it goes, right? I mean, like, it's either I had a book, I had a friend tell me, I looked it up, but that's great. That's so cool. Any last ones? So a lot of cool nature sightings, and this is great because I love it when people are able to share what they've seen. There's a plethora of ways to do so online, but being here in a group, I'm excited by your nature sightings because that's what this is all about here at the Naturalist Club. So keep looking for signs of wildlife, and next month I'm going to ask you again, and you can tell me what you've seen between these two meetings. We've got a really interesting talk tonight. I'm really excited about it. Just a few announcements before we get to it, of course. So we've got an interesting tech situation happening here tonight, but regardless, did anyone have a snack tonight? So yeah, so put your hands together for the refreshment team. Thank you, Dina, Ellen, and Anne for always supplying things. Where are you? Thank you so much. I also, before I get to this, I guess I'll get to this one next, but there's only 10 tickets left to Trivia for Nature. So just as a reminder, it's not nature trivia, it's trivia for nature. So the proceeds will go to the HNC, but it is general nature trivia, which is great. So if you still haven't got your ticket, you can scan that right now or look online. But these public events are awesome. I was going to quickly talk about the Environmentalist of the Year Awards, which just happened a couple weeks ago. Did anyone attend that by any chance?
Environmentalist of the Year Awards?
Yeah. It was a great night, and there's a few people in the crowd who actually won awards. So Jean Jacobs, congratulations. As well as Sherry O'Connor, congratulations. And keep it going for Rob Porter. So awards of merit, and Rob won the Betty Blatchel Award, which was great. For just doing tremendous work in the background, keeping things going. Rob organizes a lot of our bird counts, which takes a lot of time to do and a lot of effort to pull people together for 3 different counts in the area. But Jean and Sherry are also doing tremendous work out in the field for the HNC, just like a lot of people here have been contributing over the years. So if you've ever done anything for the Naturalist Club, thank you for doing what you do. You don't need an award to get my thanks. I'm just happy you're doing it, but it's always good to be commended. There's an event happening here on May 2nd, 10 a.m. to noon. Water is life, not a commodity. So it's a free event organized by EcoLock and hosted here at the first, or by the First Unitarian Climate Action Team. And the Monarch Awards are coming up, and we actually have someone who's going to speak to that. So Grant, do you want to come on up here to talk about the Monarch Awards real quick? So put your hands together for Grant Linney, who was the joke provider at the top.
So the Monarch Awards are about eco-friendly gardening, and they originated, I think it was 2016, and the Royal Botanical Gardens and the Hamilton Naturalist Club were involved. Jen Baker from the Hamilton Naturalist Club and Bev Wagger. And more recently, the Halton Region Master Gardeners has taken over. And while they have that name, they are at this stage, because of capacity, focusing on Hamilton. So these awards are to recognize 4 different stages of one's garden journey. And I really like the idea of a garden, and it follows, well, you'll understand what it is. The first one is Great Start. The second one, a la Monarch, is Caterpillar, and then Chrysalis, and then the final award is Monarch. The areas of consideration for these awards, these recognitions, are biodiversity, of course, native plants, seasonality, so blooming flowers at different times of year, the variety of flowers in terms of shapes, types, and color, variety in terms of vegetation heights, the absence of particular problem plants, organic material, water conservation, safe and appropriate garden maintenance. And there's more on the website. So Halton Master Gardeners, if you want to find out about that. The applications will be open on May 15th for a month. And then the judges come out in the summertime, and they need your permission to, it's a focus on your front yard, and they need a permission to come to your front yard. Even if you have a gorgeous backyard, they're just going to look at the front. Thanks.
If you are needing plants for that, to apply for that award, and you want to spruce things up, come to the native plant sale that the Halton Master Gardeners are hosting on June 6th at Dundurn Castle. Again, you can scan that one maybe, just because there's that information there, or just look up the Halton Master Gardeners information, because all of this information, this is June 6th, so still a bit of time before some of these events. The HNC, of course, does have a lot of things happening, especially as we wind down the meetings. So once these meetings end next month, we do try to ramp up the outdoor outings so people are enjoying. I mean, even right now it's still light outside, so you'll see more things cropping up. So check out our events calendar. And I mentioned the last bird study group meeting will be looking at our common birds with wonder with Julia Zarankin here next week at 7:30. So hopefully we'll see you back here for that. And our last monthly meeting, Hamilton's Climate Action Strategy, an overview and exploration of the links between nature and climate resilience. This is with Dr. Linda Lukasik and Catherine Winkleman. So this is city staff coming to talk to us about what's happening locally, and I've got a hand up here.
That's me.
That's you.
I'm Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. Okay, great. Can you give us a hint as to maybe a topic you'll cover to get people coming back next month?
Well, we haven't prepared our presentation yet, but we are going to talk about Hamilton's Climate Action Strategy, because lots of people don't know that we even have one in the city. But yeah, that's, I mean,
Perfect.
That's I'm going to say the starting.
I put you on the spot. You did great. Climate Action Strategy. I want to hear about it. We all need to hear about it, because we're all doing our parts, but it's spreading. We want to continue to spread the good word to our neighbors. I mean, like even walking down the street and I'm noticing something flying by, like I'm chatting with people about it. I'm trying to point it out to just, you ever heard of a pine siskin before? That's a pine. People are like, what the heck's a pine siskin? So the more we talk about things, the better. So I'm looking forward to having you back next month. And with that, I'll introduce tonight's speaker. Now, thank you. So Elena's here to talk about a really great endeavor. I'm not even going to cover this because she's going to cover this. So I'll stop talking and let's bring up Elena.
Switch the things here. Here. And switch. Play. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it working?
Seems to be
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you so much for having me at your monthly meeting tonight. As was mentioned earlier, there's maybe a little bit of technical challenges with the slides, so I have an assistant out here with me. She's spoken at a previous meeting, so this is her return appearance. She's going to help me with forwarding the slides on the big screens here. So yes, as mentioned, my talk tonight is going to be sharing about some of my experiences with finding pathways for Indigenous-led conservation in Northeast Ontario. So to begin, my name is Elena McCulloch. Wache Misue, hello everybody. I'm a member of Chapleau Cree First Nation through my father and my grandmother on that side. I'm also of mixed European settler heritage. I grew up in North Bay, Ontario, kind of just the very cusp of Northern Ontario here in the province. I went to school for environmental biology at McGill. And after I finished, and I sort of came home because it was during the pandemic and I didn't really know what I was doing next. I wound up getting connected with the organization that I'm going to be talking about today, Wokotowin Development. And I've been working with Wokotowin ever since. So for the last about 5.5 years now, I've worked at Wokotowin. In that time, I did also go back to school and get my master's, which I did at the University of Guelph with the WISE Lab, Wildlife, Indigenous Science, and Ecology Lab. I know there's been a couple speakers in these sessions from the WISE Lab already, but obviously the work that the WISE Lab does is all about ecology, but in partnership with Indigenous communities, seeking to answer questions that communities want the answers for. And so that's sort of why I'm down here in Southern Ontario. I still live in Guelph after finishing my master's in 2024, but I continue to work for Wokotowin. My role right now is conservation projects lead. We're all remote. We're sort of scattered across the province. We have a team of about 12 people at this point. So I do still live down in Southern Ontario. It just means that every once in a while I have to do very, very long drives, which you'll see once I share a map in a little bit. But to tell you a little bit more about Wokotowin. So Wokotowin is the organization that I work for. It's an Indigenous-owned organization. It's a social enterprise, and then we also have a not-for-profit branch. That is entirely owned by 3 First Nations in Northeast Ontario. We're owned by Chapleau Cree First Nation, which is my home community, Brunswick House First Nation, and Missinaba Cree First Nation. And Wokotowin has been around and operating in the Northeast Superior region of Ontario for 10 years now. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this year, 2026. And our name, Wokotowin, comes from a Cree word that refers to kinship and the interconnectedness of all beings. And this is just a shot from our office up in Chapleau, if anybody knows where that is. Has anybody ever been to Chapleau? Wow, a few people. That's great. So if you have, you might recognize this overpass when you drive into town. We bought this house right on the corner in 2020 or 2019 maybe, and renovated it, and that's our office. That's our physical location in Chapleau. We call it the Innovation Center. This is the view from our back deck. You can see the flags of our 3 nations flying there. And to give you, those of you who haven't been to Chapleau, an idea of where that is, it's a town of about 2,000 people, about a 2-hour drive west of Timmins, southwest of Timmins, about a 2-hour-ish drive east of Wawa, if you've been there. So we're just a little ways away from that sort of corner of Lake Superior. And then 2 of our communities, their reserves are right there, very close to town. And then Missinaba Cree is in the town of Missinaba, which is about an hour and a half drive away. And our 3 owner communities are all signatories to Treaty 9, which covers about 2/3 of the province of Ontario. And so some of what we do at Wokotowin, generally we exist to support our 3 owner First Nations and specifically their lands and resources departments when it comes to different land-related projects, especially forestry. We now have 5 registered professional foresters on our team that help with annual work schedule overviews every year with the forestry companies and different forest management planning activities that happen where the First Nations need to be consulted. But we've also run a youth guardian program for the last 5 or 6 summers now. You can see the youth in their high vis in that photo there. So we hire local Indigenous youth. We give them a summer job. They get to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. They get some experience doing fieldwork stuff and forestry stuff, but they also get to participate in some cultural activities as well, since cultural revitalization is one of our mandates from our nations. So one thing that we do every summer is we build a birch bark canoe with the communities, but we also put on events like full moon ceremonies and sweats. And then we also host a conference every winter. We just had our 4th one, our 4th annual Indigenous-led Symposium. It was located in Sudbury earlier this year in February. And we'll be having our 5th annual Indigenous-led Symposium actually in Ottawa next year, 2027, in the first week of March. But specifically, what I'm going to be talking about in the presentation tonight is about the mandate that we have as Wekwotowan from our owner First Nations to pursue landscape-level Indigenous-led conservation in this area. So this is partially in response to the opportunity that exists right now for advancing conservation in Canada and in Ontario. So Canada's Target 3 is this goal that Canada has signed on to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030 at a minimum. And currently only 11% of Ontario is protected. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential for creating more conservation, more protected areas across Canada generally, but particularly in Ontario if Canada is going to meet this target. And Target 3 of 30% by 2030 was preceded by Target 1, which was 25% conservation by 2025. And in order to meet that target, one of the initiatives that was undertaken was creating the Indigenous Circle of Experts, who created this report, We Rise Together, which is all about how Indigenous-led conservation, Indigenous protected and conserved areas can help Canada to reach these targets. Because it's generally recognized and understood that if such a large percent of the lands and waters of Canada are going to be protected or going to be conserved, then that is going to happen at the very least with consent and participation from Indigenous communities, but likely and ideally those are going to have to be largely Indigenous-led. So IPCA's, Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, are one tool not only for increasing conservation across the country, but also asserting Indigenous governance. This is the map of IPCAs that were featured in the ICE report, We Rise Together. You can see there's quite a few out west and up north. There aren't any in Ontario, at least as of right now, that are recognized, I should say. There are nations in Ontario that have declared IPCAs, but they have not been recognized by the Ontario government or protected under Canadian law. This is a really great graphic to share a little bit more about what an IPCA is and the different elements of it, because it's not just strictly about conservation and about the number of hectares that are protected. Culture and language are at the heart, at the center of Indigenous protected and conserved areas. And also, Indigenous protected and conserved areas are not meant to exist without people involved as well. So there's different elements there of community, food sovereignty, and also regenerative economies, because IPCAs, protected areas that are Indigenous-led, also have this opportunity to create an economy for the community that is sustainable. So out west, a lot of that looks like ecotourism as a way to use conservation to bring funds into the communities that can then continue to fund that conservation work, fund things like guardian programs to get community members out on the land, doing monitoring work, doing some of that intergenerational knowledge exchange, like our Guardian program does with youth. But there's also opportunities through things like biodiversity credits, nature credits, carbon credits, to create that regenerative economy that can act as a sustainable source of funding for communities that isn't tied to like government grants, which this sort of work so often is. So some more characteristics of IPCAs: they respect Indigenous knowledge systems, protocols and ceremony, support the revitalization of Indigenous language, and then, like I spoke about on the last slide, they're tied to conservation economies and creating regenerative economies. They also generally focus on cultural keystone species. So for some communities that's cedar, for some communities that's caribou, or out west it might be salmon. And they take a holistic approach to planning and governance. And then some of the pathways to designate an IPCA, they can be designated through self-declaration by the nation. Like I mentioned, there are some IPCAs that currently exist in Ontario that have been declared by the nation, but they can also be designated through existing federal or provincial legislation. So potentially through a partnership with Parks Canada, or here in Ontario would be with MECP, or Ontario Parks. And then there can also be partnerships between nations and non-governmental conservation organizations to create IPCAs. And to give a little bit of context for Ontario and sort of the environment that we're working in as Wekwotowan, In December 2022, the federal government of Canada announced 4 different PFP, or Project Finance for Permanence projects across Canada, including one in Ontario, the Omishkigo-Wokotowin PFP. And that's potentially a little bit confusing because Wokotowin is the name of my organization, but we're not leading this project. It's actually with the Mushkegowuk Tribal Council, which is a tribal council of 9 Cree nations. And of course, they've used Wokotowin here to refer to that philosophy of kinship and interconnectedness, not to refer to our organization. But 2 of the nations that own Wokotowin are actually also Omishkego communities. You can see them all the way down at the southern edge of the map there, Chapel Cree and Missinaba Cree. And so we are involved in the project through that. So this funding was announced in 2022 from the federal government to go towards the Omishkego-Wokotowin PFP with the intention of working with those nations that are part of the Mushkegowuk Tribal Council to create more Indigenous protected areas. However, the funding has not been able to be accessed for this because for so much of this territory that we're looking at, with the exception of the marine areas, which are under the jurisdiction of the federal government, these lands are under the jurisdiction of the Ontario government. And Ontario has not yet come to the table to participate in this project because the current government is more focused on things like access to land for mining than for conservation. Yeah. But to tie that back into Wokotowin and what we've been doing, that sort of provides kind of the context that we've been working in. But as I mentioned earlier, we have our own mandate from our 3 chiefs to pursue conservation. So over the last few years, we've gone after that, setting aside things like the PFP. We're still working towards getting access to that funding and coming to an agreement with Ontario. But in the meantime, we've, as Wokotowin, have taken on our own initiatives to advance Indigenous-led conservation in this part of the province. Oh, this did not format well when I downloaded it, but it says November 2022 at the top, and then in the smaller font, it says Indigenous-led Area-Based Conservation Program. ECCC. So in 2022, all 3 of our nations submitted applications to this funding program through ECCC, Indigenous-led Area-Based Conservation Program, to obviously fund Indigenous-led conservation on their territories. Now, none of those proposals were successful in getting funding through this program. It is a federal funding program through Environment and Climate Change Canada. And based on what I've seen, actually none of the proposals that were based in Ontario were successful in getting funding. I think there was one where the territory overlapped Quebec and Ontario, but that's the only Ontario-based project that was able to get funding through this Indigenous-led conservation federal funding program, which of course is consistent with the situation with the PFP and just sort of the risk factor of the Ontario government not really being willing to participate in these conversations and work on these projects. So again, boo. However, sort of in the meantime, while we were waiting to find out about that program, we at Wokotowin went ahead with hosting conservation days in each of our owner nations, and this was to sit down with community members, look at maps together, start to identify what areas people would prioritize if we were creating protected areas, and also just generally talk about what the conservation goals of our owner First Nations are, what conservation looks like to them. Because sort of if you think back to that graphic of all the different things that go into IPCAs, Indigenous-led conservation is not as simple as identifying an area for protection and then not touching it anymore. It's still about being in relationship with that area and coming up with ways to take care of that area that also take care of the communities. So then, moving through our timeline a little bit further, in April 2024, we actually found out about another funding opportunity from the federal government, this one through Parks Canada. And this was their national program for ecological corridors. So while we weren't successful, our nations weren't successful in getting that funding through ECCC, There was a little checkbox on the form that was looking to get consent for, if you're not successful for this funding proposal, do you give consent to share this application with Parks Canada for their Ecological Corridors program? And so while we weren't successful in getting that funding, those proposals did then go to Parks Canada, and Parks Canada wound up reaching out to us through Chapleau Cree First Nation, one of our owner nations, about potentially doing an Ecological Corridors project in their territory. So Parks Canada, this program's been going on for a couple of years now. It's actually just ending. It's just ending at the end of this fiscal year, so I think technically maybe has ended a couple of weeks ago. But this program from Parks Canada looked to identify areas across the country that could benefit from more connectivity. So more connections between existing protected areas and also the creation of new protected areas to ensure that we're not just protecting areas sort of in little bubbles that are isolated, but wildlife and natural processes are able to move across the landscape through these corridors. So we were able to get funding through this program with Parks Canada. We're actually just wrapping up that project right now as their program comes to an end. But we got the funding from them in late 2024. And so one of the first things we did with that funding was go back and do more community engagement. So go and talk to our community members again about what areas they want to see protected and how we should go about doing that. So there's the picture in the top right here is a dinner that we had in fall 2024, just letting community members know that we had gotten this funding and starting to get some initial suggestions on what we should do with it. And then we continued to engage with community members, some online sessions, because a lot of our membership is quite spread out across the province. But then we also attended community events in the summer, like powwows and annual gatherings, to share maps as we developed them, as we got more input and continued to adapt our maps, and sort of get community buy-in and interest in the project. We were also able to use some of the funding for capacity building at Wekotowin. So we hired a mapping coordinator, somebody with GIS expertise, since that's something we were lacking on our team for a long time. We were also able to enroll in some training. Myself and then one of my colleagues got to go out and visit the Tlokwiat tribal parks out west and see an example of a long established IPCA and learn from some of the folks out there. And we've also been working on a plant occurrence and abundance project that some of you might be interested in with some of this parks money. So it's been a goal for a while at Wekotowin to do some investigating into where plants of cultural significance are growing on the landscape and also how those populations are doing, particularly with an interest in incorporating that into forest management planning. So one of my colleagues, this has been her focus for the last about year and a half that we've been working with this Parks Canada money. So she has sat down with community members to talk about their particular concerns and interests when it comes to understory plants, gone out on the land with some people to go and look for where the plants are growing. And she's actually working right now on completing the first draft of a guidebook meant for community members to help pass on some of that knowledge to future generations of how to identify different plants of cultural significance, what some of the medicinal uses for them are, and some of the traditional knowledge. And again, this is partially in preparation for forest management planning. So this is something, another piece of context to throw into this story for you guys. So the area where our nation's territory is, in this Northeast Superior area, it's entirely overlapped by forest management units, which are what these polygons on this map are. Forest management units with forest management plans that are all industrially logged. And the forest management plans, at least for right now, are 10 years long. And it takes about 3 years to write a forest management plan. So if you can see, I don't know if you can read the numbers if they're too small, in the area where we are, kind of around here, a lot of those forest management plans are going to be renewing in 2030, 2031. And so the process of starting to write those forest management plans is just kicking off now. And so we want to have as much information as possible when we go and we sit down at those tables to ensure that important things like cultural plants, medicinal plants can be incorporated into forest management planning, since that's currently not something that's written into the forest management planning manual for Ontario. Okay, so based on all of that work that we've done over the last about year and a half, we have developed what we're calling the Height of Land Ecological Corridor, again through the Parks Canada program for ecological corridors. So we've mapped out our community's priority areas for protection. And a lot of it has come down to the rivers and the waterways that flow across the territory of our owner nations. People want to ensure that their traditional travel routes and trade routes are protected. So the corridor area that we've mapped out here follows some of the major waterways in the area. That purple sort of parallelogram that you see on the map is the Chapleau Crown Game Preserve. Folks who have been to Chapleau have maybe have some experience with that. So it's a very large, it's about 7,000 square kilometers, game preserve that was created in 1925. But the game preserve, personally, I would point to as one of the more negative examples of conservation that you find a lot in sort of more historic stories of conservation, where it was created to protect fur-bearing animals, that there was a perception the populations were decreasing, and so the First Nations who had been hunting and trapping in that area could no longer use it to sustain their livelihoods. So all three of the nations that I work for at Wekwotowen were removed from this area, displaced from the Chapleau Crown Game Preserve. So there's a lot of interest in reclaiming that area, in protecting it, because it does make up a significant part of their traditional hunting grounds, their traditional homelands, but also sort of reclaiming the jurisdiction and the decision-making in terms of conservation in that area. Because interestingly, while it is a game preserve and there's no hunting in it, there is now Indigenous rights-based hunting that changed about 25 years ago. That started to be allowed again. But there's no non-Indigenous, no hunting license hunting in the game preserve. However, they do still log in it, and they do spray aerial glyphosate herbicide where they log in it. So it's not necessarily a protected area, and there's interest in the communities for having more holistic protection in the game preserve. And again, for those of you who have been up in this area, you might know why, or have a guess as to why it's called the Height of Land Ecological Corridor. The Height of Land is this natural boundary that flows kind of diagonally across Ontario, and it's the separation between the Atlantic and the Arctic watersheds. So if you're ever road tripping across Ontario, or particularly up in that area, you might drive past some of these signs, where on one side of the sign, all waters flow north to James Bay, Hudson Bay, the Arctic Ocean, and on the other side, they flow south to the Great Lakes and then to the Atlantic. So this is a historic, significant natural boundary. It's been a big influence on travel routes and trade routes back when people used the rivers primarily to travel around. So big influence on the fur trade, and then of course also on the history of our communities that I work for. And it's also the southern boundary of Treaty 9. So that's where we take the name for our conservation project from, is recognizing the significance of that natural boundary, and also specifically its relationship to the watersheds that are so important to our communities. And this also did not format correctly when it was downloaded, so you can't read it, but just a bullet point list here of some of the work that we've done under this project with this funding from Parks Canada. So the ongoing community engagement. We've also done a land tenure study for our study area that we've been working in. And so that means just taking a look at what are the different land tenures in this area, where are the existing protected areas, where is the current privately owned land, because the majority of this area is public land or crown land. Like I mentioned, the majority of this area, it's part of forest management planning. It's open to industry. But there are some areas of private land as well. So we wanted to know where those places are, who the current owners are, whatever information we could find about private land and different kinds of land tenure. We conducted a mining risk assessment to see where the current mining activity is in this area and where there's a high density of mining claims, where we should be aware that there could be mining activity if there isn't mining happening already. We did some work creating a wetland inventory, actually with the Ducks Unlimited, which is kind of funny because they have a billboard out in the parking lot out there, which I noticed when we arrived today. And then these parts you can't read, but a cut block analysis, so looking at the forest management plans, sort of similar to the mining risk assessment, but for forestry, to see where are sort of the high risk areas for logging in the coming years. The plant study that I spoke about. And then we've also just recently initiated planning for what we're calling the protection circle, which is going to be the governance mechanism for the ecological corridor and for our protected areas work going forward, where community members are going to be nominated to this committee, which again we're calling the protection circle, to be the ones that are really making the decisions going forward about our conservation work. And just the last note that I had on this slide is that connectivity isn't just about connecting land, isn't just about connecting protected areas, but it's about communities as well. That's something that we heard in our first round of community engagement when we went out and spoke to people, sort of connecting to a little bit of the history that I shared about the Chapleau Crown Game Preserve. A lot of our community members have been displaced from their traditional area, from their homelands, and so there's opportunity with these kind of projects not only to reconnect land, but to reconnect people to land. And one of the more exciting, significant updates that we've recently accomplished under this project is we've incorporated the Wokotowin Aski Trust, which is a land trust organization, not for profit, that is owned by the same three First Nations that own Wokotowin. And so the plan with our land trust organization is to get it registered as a charity, and then use that land trust organization as the mechanism to create private land protected areas, because we're dealing with a lot of the same hurdles as other communities in Ontario are, as the PFP is dealing with when it comes to the current provincial government and what their priorities are. So working on Crown land has a lot of challenges associated with it, having to work with groups like the Ministry of Natural Resources. They don't have the same mandate that we have to increase conservation in Ontario. So sort of while we wait for potentially like a change in government here in Ontario or for other strategies to be able to do more large-scale Crown land conservation, or as some people would correct me and say like traditional territory, not Crown land, we also have this mechanism of the Land Trust as an organization that is able to buy private land for the purposes of conservation and do work on those properties to maintain them and make them conservation reserves. So yeah, and very excitingly, we actually have already purchased our first property under the Land Trust. So we have our first conservation reserve actually already purchased in the Height of Land Ecological Corridor area where we're working. That deal actually just closed a couple weeks ago, so we're still working on a press release with the seller to share more details about it, but it's 237 hectares of land. It's right on a lake, right off the highway that goes into Chapleau, so very accessible for community members to be able to go out there and access the land and use it. For things like plant walks, medicine walks, different cultural activities that we could have out there, but also those 237 hectares are now under the control, the jurisdiction of the First Nations for long-term protection and conservation. Yeah, it's very exciting. So this is reiterating some of what I already spoke about on the earlier slide, but going forward, we do have these two different protection strategies for trying to get closer to that vision that we've mapped out with our community members of what the priority areas are that they want to see protected. And the first is through the Wekotowin Aski Trust to secure and steward parcels of private land that exist in that corridor area that I showed you. And then secondly, the other mechanism that we have is looking to form partnerships to increase conservation on Crown lands. And those may not be, again, formal protected areas, like creating any new provincial parks in Ontario, but OECM's other effective conservation measures is another opportunity where we could potentially collaborate with, for instance, some of the forestry companies that are operating up there to come to agreements to say, we'll set aside this area for protection. It might not be recognized officially by the provincial government, but it will be recognized by the nations, and it still counts towards that goal of conservation. And there's also the option that I haven't talked about much in the presentation so far of co-management. So there are a few provincial parks that exist in that area that I mapped out and showed you guys earlier. So another potential pathway for not necessarily creating a larger land base of protected area in this area, but increasing Indigenous decision-making and jurisdiction over conservation in this area, is to look into potentially co-managing those provincial parks or those existing protected areas with our owner First Nations. And just to kind of wrap things up, like I mentioned, we had this funding through the Parks Canada National Program for Ecological Corridors. It's been very successful, very helpful working with Parks Canada through that program. That is what allowed us to buy that property that we just acquired a couple weeks ago, was the money from Parks Canada. But that program is now coming to an end. Our funding is officially all has to be spent by this week, so we're just wrapping that up. Now the nature strategy budget did come out recently, so it looks like there is some hope of some more federal funding for these kind of initiatives coming from Canada, but we're definitely looking for our next opportunity to raise enough funds to be able to buy another property or to be able to do another initiative like our plant occurrence and abundance project. And then just to kind of bring things back, zoom out a little bit, this is the work that Wekotowin has been doing for the last about year and a half, or I guess some of it is a little bit older than that, but recent years. But there is generally across Canada, and then even here in Ontario, there is this push for more conservation generally, but Indigenous-led conservation specifically. And there's a lot of interest in that in Indigenous communities in Ontario and across Canada, but also the general public. So it's something that we're hoping to see some more recognition of from Canada and from Ontario, and something that we're happy to be just a smaller part of as Wekotowin. And just to bring it back to this graphic one last time, the larger vision isn't just about, again, like hectares of land protected. It's also about protecting cultural keystone species for communities, creating regenerative economies that can support communities, food sovereignty, ecological restoration, guardian programs, and community wellness, and then at the center there, revitalizing culture and language in communities. And Indigenous-led protected areas and IPCAs are a very important tool to be able to do that. And with that, miigwech, thank you so much for listening. This is my email. If you want to reach out, you have any questions, or if any of you would like to collaborate on anything, that's how you can reach me. So thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Elena. So, because we've got people online at home, and just to help people hear, we'll take some questions. But raise your hand so I can come to you, so I can give you the mic to ask your question through that. But maybe I'll just start real quick by asking, like you talked about the province not really coming to the table. Was that back in 2024? Is that still the case today?
Yes, that's still the case today. My understanding is the province is not interested in losing access to, yeah, the Ring of Fire specifically, but really any area that could provide economic growth for Ontario, especially mining.
And so my follow-up question, I think, was when I saw, I love how you're following the pathway of water and you're using watersheds to denote an area, which is something that in the province's proposal to amalgamate conservation authorities, they're not really considering the travel of water. So I'm happy to see that you're putting that at the forefront. Can you, I don't know if there's any more you can elaborate on why you chose to do that?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit more. I mean, it may have been noticeable in the map that I shared of the Mushkegowuk community's territory, but two of our nations, Chapel Cree, Misnabi Cree, they're part of the Mushkegowuk Tribal Council, but they're located all the way down south around Chapleau. The other Mushkegowuk Cree communities are up along the coast. And so sort of the history of those nations is the history involves a lot of travel between the Great Lakes and then up along the coast, and like the Misnabi River, which is one of the key rivers that we've identified in our mapping, was like a main travel route for communities to travel with the seasons, to travel for trade between really what you could consider the two inland seas of Canada, James Bay and Hudson Bay up north, and then the Great Lakes down south. And so it just happened that Chapleau Cree, Misnabi Cree, those nations settled towards the southern edge of that sort of traditional territory. But they're still in relationship with those nations that are up along the coast. And so their location down in the south it's a lot of different context from the nations that are up north. The nations that are further up north are dealing more directly with like the Ring of Fire, and they also don't have forestry to deal with up there. But our nations down in the south are at the headwaters, where those waters eventually flow all the way up to the coast in James Bay and Hudson Bay in the Arctic Ocean. So there is a sense, I think, in the communities of feeling the responsibility to protect the place where the waters originate from.
Yes. Now, like over in northwestern Ontario, like in grassy narrows, you have like the province dumping mercury like for years, basically, and then you have like limited roads going through First Nations communities in like northern Ontario, in which I plan to like make an appearance this summer to like talk with people on like on lack of roads up there as a Green Party member. What are your thoughts on like those kinds of like things to the First Nations communities?
If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if I have all of this information correct off the top of my head, but I believe that community of Grassy Narrows is one of the nations in Ontario that has created their own IPCA, their own protected area, which is to some extent in response to obviously the pollution that they've been living with for so long. So they're one example of a nation that's looking to assert their sovereignty, their jurisdiction to create a protected area, sort of regardless of what Ontario recognizes. And so I think they're an inspiration to us from that perspective of having gone ahead and declared an IPCA, which I should clarify, our nations haven't declared the area that I'm presenting or any particular area as officially an IPCA. At this point, it is sort of the vision that we've mapped out that we're looking to get closer towards through some of the mechanisms that I talked about. But that's what comes to mind in response to that question. I don't know if I answered the roads part of it, but okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you're involving the youth in these projects with language and with ceremony and this. So, my question is for the aerial spraying. How widespread is it in your territory?
Yeah, it's not a huge number of hectares that are sprayed annually, but it does happen every summer around August. A couple of those forest management units that you saw on the map earlier, a couple of them sometimes forgo it. Like I think a couple last summer wound up not using it. But most of them that we work directly with do use it, again, like every summer. And it's not necessarily a very large area that gets sprayed, but it is something that's of really significant concern for our owner nations. Because even if it is a relatively small area that's being sprayed, there's this understanding of everything being connected, and this concern that the chemicals, the glyphosate that the forestry companies spray then gets into the water or gets into the food chain. And people have made observations of, moose that they've harvested having certain like deformities of the liver or different like spots on the meat that they associate with that herbicide spraying. And so for some people, it's to the point where like they don't eat certain traditional foods because they're concerned about the health impacts of glyphosate. So we at McCulloch have been involved in a herbicide alternatives program with some partners, including some of the forestry companies, to some researchers to try to get closer to no use of the herbicide. I mean, the goal of the First Nations and McCulloch is to get to zero use of it, but there has been some effort to decrease the amount that's been used over the last couple of decades at this point. But it's still a big priority and a goal for us is to see what different partners we can work with, some being the forestry companies, but then also some government partners to try to get towards no use of the aerial herbicide, which I think I know that there's a lot of public support for that, and I think I've seen that grow in some of the recent years, recent summers, when the announcements go out that aerial spraying is going to happen. There's bigger responses from the public saying that we don't want that. So we're hopeful that we're moving in a good direction on that issue.
Great, thank you. Got a few more questions, so it's good to see some hands up. If you got a question, let me see it, but we'll go here.
Could you speak a little bit more about the forest management areas and the plans? I didn't know there were so many and how they were all divided. And what is the actual purpose of the spraying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of this stuff is, like I did my bachelor's in environmental science, and I feel like a lot of this information doesn't really get covered, even in environmental focused education. Like I didn't know until I started working with McCulloch in 2020 that aerial spraying was something that happened on forests in Ontario. But yeah, so these FMUs, or forest management units, you can see cover the sort of strip of the province. So they're divided up, and then different companies own the license to operate on those forests. So for example, the Missinaibi forest, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Oh, right. I lost my assistant. Just a second. There. You can see my cursor?
You can use the laser pointer.
The laser pointer?
The middle one.
Aha! Like this purple one right here, that's our Chapleau is located inside this purple forest management unit. It's called the Missinaibi Forest, and it's managed by a company called Green First. It used to be RIAM, and before that it was Tembec. But they are the sustainable forest license holder for that forest management unit. They have the responsibility that's sort of passed down from the province of Ontario to manage that forest. And they have certain guidelines, goals that they have to hit when it comes to managing the forest. They have to maintain a certain composition of tree species, even though they're harvesting. So they're responsible for replanting with seedlings after they log an area. And because they're responsible for getting the areas that they log back to, they call it free to grow, but like back to the status, the species composition that they were in before they went in and logged that area. Sometimes they use different tools to take out the competition for those seedlings that they plant. They also have to buy the seedlings that they plant, so it's also a financial investment for them. So they don't want the seedlings to be outcompeted and killed by other vegetation, because then it's also a financial loss for them. They might have to, replant that area again. So the trees that get cut in Ontario that are profitable are mostly conifer trees, spruce, pine, and fir trees. So those are the seedlings that they replant. So then species like birch and poplar act as competitors. Different leafy plants act as competitors to the seedlings. And so there's different tools that can be used to reduce that competition. And one of them is glyphosate-based herbicides. So glyphosate is a herbicide that kills leafy vegetation, but it doesn't kill those needle trees that the companies are planting. So that's where the aerial herbicide application comes in. We, again, are trying to come up with solutions where we can do more manual tending, of like going out with like brush saws or clippers and reducing competition that way. But that tends to be a lot more expensive than the aerial herbicide spraying. It can be hard to hire people to do that work. Does that help?
So Wakota means, I'm looking to get back to my notes, it's kinship and interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a two-part question? Is it fair to say that other First Nations have equivalent words for the same meaning?
Yes, definitely. That's something that was shared with us actually when we went out west to Vancouver Island on Tloquiat, is they have their own word for everything is one.
Have you heard the term all-mine relations?
Yes.
That originates from First Nations too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's an Anishinaabe phrase.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the artwork that's on the slide, like about the artists or the significance or anything. Thanks.
This is the logo that we developed for the Height of Land Ecological Corridor. We worked with a consultant who does some of our different branding, communication stuff to develop it. It's inspired by the medicine wheel and the 4 directions, which you can see there. And it's kind of based on the... Oh, for the people online, sorry. Based on the color palette of Wokotowin, where we have kind of the rainbow of colors. And then in terms of, I'm gonna do this. So this one. In terms of these kind of squiggles, that's just free graphics from Canva that I chose because I felt like it encompassed kind of that like idea of interconnection and kind of like flowing across the landscape. Yeah.
Hi. So you talked a lot about IPCAs and about having visited the West Coast. So my question is related to Mears Island. So like Mears Island is like an IPCA, but the copper mineral rights are owned by one company, and then the logging rights on the surface are owned by another company. But through the activism, nothing's happened there, and it's looks pretty soundly protected. So my question is, from having made that visit, what lessons did you get that might apply to Ontario or your home territory for using the IPCA to prevent ring of fire type activity, or maybe some of the IPCAs were already made before all this critical minerals and such has been spoken about?
Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to share about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I have the dates right, I think a lot of the activism around Mears Island out west started in the 80s. So one lesson that we took from going out there and visiting is that these things do take time. Like we look at some of the communities out west and the IPCAs out west and think like, wow, they're so much more advanced than like here in Ontario. But you know, part of the reason for that is because they've been working on those projects out there for decades. So it is a matter of, you know, working on things for a long time. But yeah, the mineral rights thing is definitely tricky, because even with the like private land approach that I talked about to conservation, you know, you can buy the surface rights to a property, but the mining claims or the mineral rights might still be owned by somebody else. And so, for example, the property that we just purchased a couple weeks ago, it does have some mining claims that overlap it. And so we're able to go and get that information of like, okay, who owns them? Who can we contact? Can we reach out to them and sort of ask them to not do anything with those claims or to sell them to us, or just remove them? But we also have some of the confidence that once we do a little bit more press around that property and we like get signs up and things saying that it is an Indigenous owned conservation area, it does make it a lot less likely that somebody's going to develop a mine on it, just because of the public relations angle to that. So I think that's something that other nations, other IPCAs have done, and it's been successful, like you said, through that kind of activism, even though those rights might be owned by companies or by individuals. So I think when it comes to the area we're working in Ontario, there is a lesson in that of the PR, the communications around those protected areas being one way to avoid actually development of those mineral rights or logging rights. And we know that there is a lot of support in Ontario from the general public for more conservation. So I think the public would be on our side with those things.
Got time for a couple more. I see a hand up over there.
I don't know if you're aware of the mining projects around Strange Lake in Ontario. No. So that area contains a lot of rare earth minerals, huge amounts, but in very small little, groupings, and a lot of public individuals, very wealthy, have bought parts of that land. The Fifth Estate 1 or 2 weeks ago did a segment in the last 20 minutes of the show, and it was quite frightening to me to hear how the land would be mined with disregard to the environment. So that's just my comment.
Thank you.
I hope you could kind of do something about it. Yeah, the PR.
Thank you for teaching us so much this evening. My question is whether in your cultural practices that you want to bring back to the land, if cultural fire is one of those things.
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. We actually are just like this week hiring somebody to join our team who's going to be focused on fire. So there's, I think, a pretty similar story around fire and cultural burning as with a lot of other things of the Ministry of Natural Resources in Ontario doesn't like it. So it's something that, yeah, it's something that I know there's a lot of interest in. Actually, at our Indigenous Land Symposium a couple months ago in Sudbury, we had a panel talking about cultural burning, and a few people who were there in attendance shared about how they'd gone out and burned a small island to help regenerate it and get blueberries to come back and those sorts of things. So it's something that we're interested in. We don't have any real projects lined up right now to do any sort of trials around that. But it is something that could also tie into the herbicide alternatives program as a way of controlling that vegetation that's competing with the planted seedlings rather than using the glyphosate application. Fire could be a culturally appropriate and obviously like less toxic way to do that.
Hi, I was just wondering, like, for those of us in the South, what could we do to help?
That's a great question. Well, I mentioned we're working on getting charitable status for our land trust. Once we do that, we will be fundraising. So that's one way that we're absolutely looking for support, especially with programs like the Parks Canada program coming to an end. We don't have a lot of financial support lined up to keep doing this work. We're also looking for sponsors for the 2027 Indigenous Land Symposium, if anybody here has a connection that could help with that. But then beyond that, I think maybe just, support helping to raise awareness within your communities of this work that's going on. We do have, social media pages where we post about some of this work, so following along there. And then beyond that, I'm not as tapped into it, but I'm sure that there are local initiatives with local Indigenous communities down here in Southern Ontario that are doing similar work or have similar priorities.
I'll ask maybe the last question. I've not traveled to this area before. I've been to Maui. We were talking about nature sightings earlier. You mentioned keystone species. What are some of the keystone species that you can share with us?
That's a great question. Moose is a really big one. Moose is one that we have some programming around as Wokotowin. It's another mandate that we have from our owner nations is for moose recovery because it's been observed in this territory, but then also in a lot of places in Canada that the moose populations are declining. And there's a lot of complex factors that are causing that, and a lot of it's due to like climate change and like different parasites and diseases moving around. So there's a lot of interest in moose, protecting moose. Moose is a cultural keystone species. Actually, this is a really regional, local cultural keystone species, but in Folliet, or around the town of Folliet, which is just sort of like an hour outside of Chapleau, there actually is a population of white moose, which are sometimes also called spirit moose, that are particularly culturally significant. So that would definitely be a really exciting nature sighting. I don't know if anybody who's been up to that area has seen one.
I've seen one in BC long ago.
Okay.
With the penguins.
No.
That's great. I wasn't sure if there are any, I guess with moose, hence the protection of land, because I think they need specific tracts of intact forest for travel. So that's great. Cool. Well, I don't think there are any more questions. So on behalf of the Hamilton Naturist Club, Elena, let's put our hands together for the thank you so much. Keep up the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much for coming down here. Thank you to your assistant for the great work as well. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for tuning in at home, and we'll see everyone back next week or next month. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.